Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I am political commentator and executive producer Michael Yaffee.
Michael, good to be with you again this week. Special program this week, Michael, a very special interview. A professional golfer who splits his time between Maine and Florida. And he's out with a brand new book. It's entitled, I Call Him Mr. President. A story of a personal relationship, a very personal relationship with George H.W. Bush by Ken Raynor. I think you're going to find it fascinating. Invite you to stay put. The Florida Roundtable begins following these messages.
How do you define love? Most everyone knows it's real, but who can really describe it? I sure can't define love, but the Bible can. It says love is patient and kind, not envious or selfish or arrogant. Love doesn't keep records when people let us down. Love is being happy for the success of others. It's optimistic and believes in others. It puts up with a lot and never gives up. To sum it all up, love is so much more than a feeling. It's the commitment to love a person no matter what. It's a decision, an action verb. Dr. DeBakey, the famous heart surgeon out of Houston, once received a letter from an 11-year-old girl. She asked, "Is there any love in an artificial heart?" The answer is no. But love can be found in an old heart made new by the power of Jesus. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my new heart because of a heart transplant by the great physician, Jesus.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click on the link How to Know Jesus. That's rightfromtheheart.org.
An opioid overdose does not need to end in tragedy. At-home rescue treatments like naloxone can help you save a life. Naloxone is available without a prescription and doesn't need to be administered by a health professional. Learn to recognize the signs of an overdose, like unresponsiveness, snoring sounds, and shallow breathing during an emergency. To learn more, dial pound 250 on your cell phone, say the keyword Save a Life, and you will have the option to receive a one-time auto-dial text message from iHeartMedia. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Children and Families. Standard message and data rates apply.
Hey, it's Tom McCubbin here, and I'd like to tell you about this new cool turf that is unlike any other, Scott's Pro Vista St. Augustine, and it's now available across the state from the good folks at Bethel Farms. Scott's Pro Vista St. Augustine will give you complete weed control and 50% less mowing when compared to traditional St. Augustine. Less maintenance and easy weed control? Sounds good to me. To get this new turf for your lawn, visit BethelFarms.com for more information. That's BethelFarms.com.
This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I am political commentator and executive producer Michael Yaffee.
Michael, a pleasure to be with you. As always, we enjoy the conversation here, and something special today that I haven't done for quite a while. Several seasons back, when Ronald Reagan retired from the White House and went to the ranch in California, they are assigned Secret Service men even in their retirement,
right.
And the former president was a great, loved horseback, and he kept horses. One of his prize birthday presents was an English saddle given to him by Queen Elizabeth when she visited the ranch. And he went horseback riding quite frequently. He loved it. And so one of the Secret Service men who had been with him in the White House got assigned to be a bodyguard in California because he was a good horseman. And he wrote a book about Ronald Reagan.
Oh, really?
And we had him as a guest on this program. And he is now, the Reagan Ranch is now a public museum. Young Americans for Freedom own the thing and do fundraisers and whatnot. And the gentleman who was on this show is an officer of the Young Americans for Freedom and a director of the Reagan Ranch out in California and still rides horses out there to this day.
I'm always fascinated by Secret Service tales of presidents because they must know a lot.
he wrote this book too about his commander-in-chief and had marvelous stories to share about President Reagan, not only during the presidency but in the years afterwards.
Right.
Until he suffered a fall, and the doctors told him he couldn't ride the horse anymore, and that was a great disappointment.
I can imagine.
He had to stay off the horseback. But, of course, George H.W. Bush was his vice president for 8 years. Not an easy task. Mr. Bush, in interviews for publication, has said that Ronald Reagan was very nice to him and tried to increase the responsibility of the office of vice president. Not an easy thing to do, because the vice president of the United States has, the only responsibility he has is to be the officiating officer of the U.S. Senate.
Right, and only can vote for tiebreakers.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore. How often do we have a tie? It's just,
although we did have one this year.
Yeah, we did.
With Mike Pence.
Generally speaking, the vice president goes to funerals, makes speeches, goes to places where the president can't get. In the case of John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, where they really didn't like each other at all, the Kennedys said to Lyndon, "We're glad you helped us carry Texas. Now go sit in a corner and shut up." And I have the audio of Lyndon Johnson saying that his years as vice president were not the most productive years of his life.
Well, I mean, you even all go all the way back to John Adams, who thought, it was one of the most worthless jobs.
Yeah. John C. Calhoun resigned it. This the highest level government official to resign the vice presidency. And that was when Andrew Jackson was in office, for heaven's sakes. But in any event, it's a thing. The gentleman that's going to be joining us here in a moment, Ken Raynor, has written this book called I Call Him Mr. President. His co-author is Michael Patrick Shields. One of the things that Ken does is spend about close to half the year right here in Florida at Coral Creek over by Boca Grande, where the Bush family like to come and go fishing. One story I probably won't ask him about is the time that the president hooked Jeb Bush in the ear.
Ooh.
While he was casting, and he hooked his own son right in the ear.
Ouch.
Caught Jebby. But yes, that made
that'll leave a scar. Probably still a scar.
Made national headlines. That's for sure. So, but I look forward to hearing the personal stories. The personal, you don't get to hear the positive personal side of presidents very often.
Different angle to it, yeah.
And that is what we're going to do today when we are joined by Ken Raynor. So, again, the book is I Call Him Mr. President. We'll remind you that this is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And our conversation continues following these messages.
It was a great night partying and laughing with friends. That is, until you decided to drive impaired. Now there's thousands in fines, no license, and possibly jail time. And that's if everyone is lucky enough to survive. No fun at all. Celebrate responsibly. Use a ride service, call a friend, or have a designated driver. Always drive sober so that everyone can arrive alive. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles.
There's no better time to visit Bok Tower Gardens in Lake Wales than Christmas time. Come home for the holidays with the 24th Annual Holiday Home Tour at Pinewood Estate, a 1930s Mediterranean-style mansion transformed into a glittering holiday showcase. Plus poinsettia and seasonal foliage displays, the all-new Children's Garden, holiday shopping, garden tours, Christmas music on the Singing Tower Carillon, and more. Christmas at Bok Tower Gardens, open daily through January 6th. Proudly sponsored by Visit Central Florida and the State of Florida Division of Cultural Affairs.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Michael, as promised at this point in the program, we are joined by Ken Raynor. He is a professional golfer. He's got a brand new book out, available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. It is entitled, I Call Him Mr. President, Stories of Golf, Fishing, and Life with My Friend George H.W. Bush. It's a delightful book. Ken, welcome to the Florida Roundtable.
Great to be with you. Great to be back here in this great state of Florida, and I look forward to our discussions.
All righty. Before we get into this, I wanted to have you, as opposed to my sitting here and rattling off your credentials and whatnot, your background, and a little bit about your personal involvement in golf and how you came to be where you are. Why don't you go ahead and take the first minute or so and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. You never know where you're going to end up. And I look back in the mirror here a little bit. When I was 7, 8, 9 years old, my dad let me hit some golf balls in our 3-acre yard and build a couple little greens with a wheelbarrow and little bounce golf balls off the house. Little did I know that I'd be a golf professional, a PGA member, many years later. Maybe it was from my bones. I'm a direct relative of Seth Raynor, the great architect, of course, designer. I've been lucky enough to be up in Kennebunkport, Maine, pretty much most of my career. Just finished my 38th year there as the PGA professional, and I've been down here at Coral Creek here in Florida, in Placida, Florida, in the Boca Grande area since 1999, and we opened Coral Creek in the year 2000, designed by Tom Fazio. And we're looking forward to hosting, for the second time, the Florida Mid-Amateur next year.
And so those of our listeners who are golf enthusiasts can jump in the car and take a ride over, or they can give you a call and make an appointment, come over, say hello, and play around over there at Boca Grande.
Well, we certainly like to, if the pro calls and introduces them properly and do it the right time of the year. We are a private golf course, but we sure like to share the opportunity and the golf experience that we have. It's a great venue. It's pretty unique due to the fact that we have caddies. We have no homes on the golf course. We're so honored to have 6,000 acres of nature preserve that abounds the property. So Mother Nature abounds, and it's a great way to play the game of golf, the old-fashioned way with caddies and the silence of the game and the competition and no infrastructure.
Wow. It's beautiful. Now, George H.W. Bush, of course, spent a lot of time in the Boca Grande area. The whole family would come for the fishing tournament every year. But, of course, his home in Texas and the family estate up at Kennebunkport. And for beginners, we want you to share the story of how you first met Mr. Bush and started this friendship.
Well, obviously, it's a great honor just to be able to have that discussion and be as close as I am. I've referred to him many, many times as my second dad. We've done so many things together over the last 40 years, and that's what this book is all about. It's really about friendship and just the amazing tales that's fun to tell. As Barbara Bush wrote into a note to me recently, the reader is going to see another side of George Bush that most books have never approached. It's not a political book. It's just about friendship, the love of the game of golf, the love of fishing. But the president's family has been in Kennebunkport for years. Mr. Walker from the Walker Cup, his grandfather, his father, the Walker family itself have all had residences one time or another in Kennebunkport. So when I became head golf professional at Cape Arundel in 1979, Mr. Bush at the same time arrived at the club with a pretty extensive resume from all the things that we know we've done, from China to CIA to head of the Republican Party. And that's when he was going to run for the nomination of the presidency of the United States for the Republican Party, and he was going to run against Ronald Reagan. And I think we all know the rest of that story, but he became vice president for the next 8 years and then president for 4 years. And so our association started basically when he came back to Cape Arundel as a candidate for the Republican Party. And we share so many common things. And he arrives, as he did to the last day that we ever played golf together, with no title. He comes in as a genuine person, loving the game of golf, loving Kenny Bunkport, loves the sea, loves the boat, loves to fish. And, we just kept building a bigger and bigger friendship. He always allowed me to participate with him. He always invited me to a round of golf, and we did that for, almost 40 years. So you can imagine the tales that we've shared and the people we've shared them with. And it's been obviously monumental in my life as a PGA professional. And so I'm sharing it with the reader and trying to raise a little charitable money with the book. And again, golf doing a good thing and raising money through golf for charities and helping out, as the president would say, be a point of light.
So I have to ask this question. How was his game?
Well, it's interesting you ask that. I get that question quite a bit. He's loved the game of golf. He loves it because he gets to play with family. He gets to play with friends. He gets to play at one of his favorite courses, as he stated, in Kenny Bunkport, because of the environment of that. But his game is great. He was actually club champion at Cape Arundel in 1947. So it goes to show that he's played well. I think probably his best round that I ever saw him have was around 76 or 78 in our years. But many times he'd shoot in the middle 80s for sure. So he certainly knows the game, and it's so great to know that we had a president that enjoyed the game as much as he has.
And actually, there was a whole new generation that came up that wasn't aware of it, or wasn't old enough to remember Dwight Eisenhower. But of course, Ike helped to popularize golf, coming out of World War II in his years in the White House, and even had some putting greens installed on the White House lawn where he could sneak out and practice his putting. But it's those kind of folks that have brought golf the great popularity that it has enjoyed in recent years, those and some of the great players. And when was the first time you remember playing around the golf with George Bush?
I think the time I just explained, when he came as about to be a candidate with the Republican Party to run for the presidency in the late 70s. He came up and spent the weekend, and he was a busy guy up to that point, as he remained. And he was glad to be back at Cape Arundel, and he instantly, as the head golf professional, invited me to let's go out and play a game tomorrow. And that was the start of something that I never have imagined, playing golf with the President of the United States and having all the different visitors that he's had and enduring all of that friendship that we've had.
And Ken, I mentioned the presidential putting greens, and knowing how greatly that Mr. Bush enjoyed the game, but I know you have a story about putting greens and Mr. Bush as well.
Well, it's amazing because you think about the president, and Dwight Eisenhower having the putting green at the White House. It was a thrill to go out there with the president after a nice dinner, after a stay at the White House, and make some putts and talk about friends and family and golf, of course. And I was blessed enough to spend a weekend up at Camp David, and golf is represented at Camp David very well. They have an actually natural green there. With 3 different tees with a bunker. So you can go out there anywhere from an 8-iron to a pitching wedge and play to the same green from different angles, which is, tremendously satisfying and life memory being at Camp David playing golf at there. And, of course, in Kenny Bunkport, believe it or not, a lot of people may not know, but the president has a putting green in his own home at Walker's Point in Kenny Bunkport. Wow. So a lot of times when we go for a cocktail party, you arrive, you're greeted, and then the next thing you know, you're out having a drink on a beautiful evening, having laughs over a little putting contest prior to dinner. So golf is alive and well in the Bush family.
Yeah. One of the things that the former president is noted for, and sometimes we hear people say, well, golf is kind of slow and they take too long, but if you're playing with George H.W. Bush, that's not the case.
That is not, and we use a lot of times it was more about how long it took us to play rather than what was the score. But the president, to be president, as 43, used to say his son, to be president, you're a fierce competitor. you're not president without being a competitor. So we always had some kind of a fun match. But one particular time comes to mind about speed of play, and that was the president and I went out one morning, deuce sweepers, as we know in golf. And the next thing we know, we're coming up the 18th hole, and the Secret Service came up to us and said, "Sir, I don't know if you realize this, but it just took you an hour and 24 minutes to play 18 holes." And we didn't even realize it. We were just whipping around, having a great time together, just the two of us. And about a week later, I got a call from the New York Times reporter wanting to do a story on this, and what he wanted to do was come and play golf himself to see if he could play in an hour 24 minutes. And he came and proceeded to write a story, and he was on the 17th hole with less than a minute to play, three-putted the 17th, ran to the 18th, had like 30-something seconds to play 18, topped it in the water, and end of conversation about his round of golf. But it was a great fun article, not only about the president, but about the game of golf.
So was there quite a process when he would play golf there in terms of security, Secret Service that they would have to go through? I mean, is that part of the reason he would play so fast?
No, they had nothing to do with it. Actually, a lot of the Secret Service officers on their time off would play golf and come and got to know him quite well and gave them some lessons, and good news, sold some clubs to them and got to meet their families. So golf was important to the Secret Service when they had some downtime, and Secret Service was just there to do their job and security, but they stayed out of our way. And after a while, you basically blended in with the landscape to a certain degree. But security measures, unfortunately, in this world that we live in, was important. And the president just honors them as he does our military, and they just help make the game sometimes a little bit more fun, actually.
He knew that they had to be there, and even if they weren't in your foursome, he could be inclusive and recognize that he had these things going on. Well, Ken, we are almost at that point where we're going to have to take a little bit of a break along our network line here, and I want to allow myself plenty of time to remind the folks that this is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest is Ken Raynor. His brand new book, I Call Him Mr. President, Stories of Golf, Fishing, and Life, with My Friend George H.W. Bush, co-authored by Michael Patrick Shields, a foreword by Barbara Bush. We're going to find out about that in a minute or two. It's from our friends at Skyhorse Publishing, and it is available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. It is a delightful story, one that we think you'll really enjoy. And if you'll stay put, the Florida Roundtable continues following these messages.
For families facing the challenge of a loved one with an opioid use disorder, it's important to know that shallow breathing, snoring, or gurgling sounds and unresponsiveness can be signs of an overdose. In the event of an emergency, an at-home treatment like naloxone can help save a life. To learn more, dial pound 250 on your cell phone and say the key words "save a life." You will have the option to receive a one-time auto-dialed text message from iHeartMedia. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Children and Families. Standard message and data rates apply.
There's a problem if you drink and drive a boat. It never just affects you. Boating under the influence is illegal and dangerous. Save lives by staying sober. Learn more about Florida's boating laws at myfwc.com. Brought to you by the FWC Division of Law Enforcement. Florida's boating environment is always changing. New sunsets, new experiences that you won't find anywhere else on Earth. But one thing that never changes: boating while impaired by drugs or alcohol. It's illegal in the state of Florida. Boating under the influence will land you in jail, or worse, kill someone you love. It's just simply not a risk worth taking. Learn more about Florida's boating laws at myfwc.com. Brought to you by the FWC Division of Law Enforcement.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Bear Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. BearAdvance.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Terrorist acts and shootings are often described as great tragedies. They are not. We live in a world so concerned with being politically correct that they're afraid to call evil what it is, evil. Man's sin nature is as old as the Garden of Eden. Many love to blame culture, poverty, or lack of education and opportunity as the problem. They may have a good or bad impact, but the big problem is sin. Acknowledging our sin nature will show us our need for a Savior who changes us from within. That Savior's name is Jesus. He came to die for the sins of all who will acknowledge their sin. Faith in Him strikes a mighty blow at evil. So quit calling man's evil acts a tragedy. They are evil and God hates it. Yet thankfully He loves us in spite of our evil and sin. Jesus not only forgives us, but gives us the want to overcome evil with good. This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
All right, crew, let's get her dug.
Honey, you want to give me a hand? I'm planting that tree, remember?
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 business days before any digging project, so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. This includes natural gas and petroleum pipelines, electric, communication cables, and water and sewer lines. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is the PGA's Ken Raynor. He is the golf professional at Cape Coral here in Florida, Coral Creek, rather, I'm sorry, and at Arundel at Kennebunkport, Maine. He has a brand new book. I call him Mr. President. And Ken, your co-author is Michael Patrick Shields, and I want you to take a minute and tell us a little bit about him.
Well, Michael has become a great friend, not just because of the book. The good news is we stayed friends while we wrote the book. But Michael got involved with a charitable event that we have up in Kennebunkport called Gary's House. It's kind of like a Ronald McDonald type of house that we've raised money for. President Bush has been very involved in it, and actually we call it the George Bush Cape Arundel Celebrity Classic. He lent his name to it, for longevity purposes. Michael got involved, and I think he kind of really saw in our eyes and felt it in our hearts the relationship that I had with President 41, my dear friend and my second dad. And so Michael had written a few other books. He's written a few on golf. He wrote some Ben Hogan things. He wrote the biography of Ben Wright. And so Michael came to me very interested in saying, let's do a book together. Well, before I could say yes, Michael had done a lot of prerequisite work. The next thing I know, we're off and running. And when I realized we could do it for charity, I agreed to do it. And Michael is in Michigan. He's a radio host on Radio Big Show Michigan every morning, Monday through Friday, and has been a consummate human and trying to do good for all of us, and hopefully this book will be part of that.
And we've talked a lot about your experience with George Bush playing golf, but you also like to go fishing with him as well, isn't that right?
Yeah, we love that tranquility that we have on the golf course, and that translates also to what we do with the fishing rod in our hands. We've enjoyed coming to Boca Grande. It all started prior to Coral Creek even being developed. Well, the president used to come down to Boca Grande, and we'd play Gasparilla Inn and get on the water with the great guide here, Phil O'Bannon, and go out and look for the snook. And, of course, he enjoyed going down and raising money for the Everglades with his tournament that he had down in Isle Morada with our great friend Johnny Morris from Bass Pro Shops, and our great friend also Andy Mill who's probably one of the great fly fishing tarpon guys in the world. And the book has a great picture of President Bush holding a tarpon, which was a joy of his life. And we also took it, beyond Florida, great fishing in the state of Maine for striped bass and the bluefish. And then we really got into some other types of fishing where we went for 10 straight years. We went up to Labrador and Newfoundland in Canada to fish for Atlantic salmon. And we got very close. Within 6 hours of fishing with Ted Williams, Ted was supposed to go on our first trip to northern Labrador, and he called 6 hours before we were supposed to pick him up. His girlfriend became ill, and he was not able to attend, so that broke all of our hearts. But would imagine for all your listeners to go on a fishing trip with Ted Williams and President Bush up in the tundra of Labrador and Newfoundland. But then the last thing we really done that we really enjoyed was going up to the Tree River up in the Arctic Circle over in the Nunavik, which is above British Columbia, above the Arctic Circle, for these amazing Arctic char. So the president was just one of the boys, and that's what he really enjoyed the very most. On the golf course or on the fishing trips, rod in hand, golf club in hand, he was out there just like all of us. And there are no titles, nor did he win any titles. So a great friendship has evolved on the golf course and on various rivers throughout the country.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the personality of George H.W. Bush and the over the years that you've known him. Obviously, 4 years in the White House, he is the commander-in-chief, arguably the most powerful man in the world. His finger is never more than a minute away from the button that could end the whole world of that. But he was a very personable man, and I think that comes clear in your book. And I wanted you to reflect invitations perhaps that stick out in your mind, just like you're mentioning about Ted Williams. These kind of, the helicopter is there to take him off to the Defense Department or whatever, but he's also visiting with you at the same time.
Well, thank you for that. And, it's pretty amazing I'm honored that Barbara Bush wrote the foreword for this book. And she said it in just a great way, in her way, if you know Bar well. But what really hits my heart a little bit was when she mentioned in it that the time that the president and I spent together, especially during his presidency, was a welcome relief to the pressures of the job. And that's really how I kind of looked at it when we got together, whether it would be power walking on the beach in the middle of February in Maine or going on these rivers or looking for a snook here in Florida, just to be able to see that smile on his face and that ability to turn it off for an hour here, an hour there, knowing how important it really was. But believe me, obviously the pressures of the job, weigh on any president all the time. But he had it down to an art form of sharing, sharing the opportunities, getting to the first tee with all the world press there, and he would instantly holler out, well, I'm instilling as the chief executive Rule 35. And, of course, we all know there's only 34 rules of golf. That the Rule 35 was the no laughing rule in case he hit a bad tee shot off the first hole. And that kind of put everybody who might have been joining us for the first time to play with the President of the United States a little bit more at ease so that they hit a good golf shot. And then it was laughs and pleasures from there. But the President really had it down to an art form, as Barr does, about, inviting people, sharing opportunities with them. A good example is my wife, Ann, and I used to drive to Florida on our way to Boca Grande from Maine. And when they were in the White House, I would say, well, Ann and Ken, it's a free place to stay at the White House is cheaper than the Holiday Inn. So we used to drive her 9 hours and spend the night at the White House, have a nice dinner with them as dear friends, not as the president. It just happened to be in the White House. And then we'd get in the car the next day and head to Savannah, Georgia, and stay at the Holiday Inn. And, they were always embracing not just ourselves, but lots and lots of people all around them, and in creating lifelong memories for all of us. And I will have to say real quickly, that's probably the best thing about writing this book is every time somebody talks to me about the book, they too have a short story to share about maybe a handshake or an opportunity or an almost missed opportunity or a round of golf, but it's brought back a positive memory for themselves that make them smile and remind us how special life really is.
And you talked about how these experiences when George Bush would go fishing or play golf with you, it was kind of an escape for him. Does that mean you pretty much never talked politics with him?
Well, when you have the world press, on the golf course, we used to have them on the first tee, and then they were on the 9th green when we approached the front nine, completion, and then on the 18th green as we completed the round of golf. So, he couldn't get away from it 100%. He embraced a lot of the people. It was amazing how well he knew all the press's names, but he knew their family. He knew whether their family was visiting with him in Kennebunkport or Boca Grande. He knew that she was a runner. He had his kids with him this week. So there was politics or a couple rounds had to be stopped because something happened in the world. I remember when the commissioner of baseball passed away, Mr. Giamatti. The president got word in the middle of a round, and he very quickly stopped the round to go back to the press to make a heartfelt presentation about the loss of a friend and a great sportsman. And so, while we're out there, we're doing what we're due. But there's other times when the president couldn't continue to do that because the job superseded that.
Now, I'm gonna ask you something here, and we may run out of time here, but I want you. It's a story that I think is a marvelous one. A gentleman who was several times a guest on this program over the years, and a long-time resident of the Orlando area in Central Florida, a great humanitarian, and the Arnold Palmer Hospital for Women and Children, and wonderful things that he did in Central Florida that many people here don't appreciate or even know about. But you had the opportunity to spend time between Mr. Bush and Mr. Palmer, and I want you to share some of your memories of those times.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, obviously, as a PGA professional, nothing can be grander to share your home golf course where your opportunities have developed. You're the host golf professional, and to be able to host the President of the United States and then the King, it was, extremely special. And, the first things that come to my mind with your question was how similar the two people were, how congenial Arnold Palmer was. He always said, sign your name so the people can read it when you give an autograph. President Bush would invite people to come over that were standing aside and say, hey, can we do a picture together? Hey, can I sign that for you? I'd love to do that for you. And how engaging they both were. And then, obviously, using golf together.
And, George, and again, we have to pause here. I'm sorry. We'll let you come back and finish that up. This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest is Ken Raynor. I call him Mr. President, and we'll continue in a moment.
Where do you want to go on a vacation or honeymoon? The Caribbean, Europe, Hawaii, Mexico? How about Disney or a cruise? At Superior Cruise and Travel, we've got you covered. We'll assign you your own travel concierge. They'll help you design a custom vacation plan that you can't find online. And the service is completely free. You can't compare the value of this to any other online travel company. We can help you plan a custom vacation anywhere in the world. We even offer payment plans with no credit card required. Now you pay off your vacation on your time schedule. Call now and mention the promo code RADIO and save up to $500. Book your custom trip. Call Superior Cruise and Travel now and talk to one of the highest rated travel agencies in the country with a 5-star A+ online rating.
800-659-5087. 800-659-5087. 800-659-5087. That's 800-659-5087.
How do you define love? Most everyone knows it's real, but who can really describe it? I sure can't define love, but the Bible can. It says love is patient and kind, not envious or selfish or arrogant. Love doesn't keep records when people let us down. Love is being happy for the success of others. It's optimistic and believes in others. It puts up with a lot and never gives up. To sum it all up, love is so much more than a feeling. It's the commitment to love a person no matter what. It's a decision, an action verb. Dr. DeBakey, the famous heart surgeon out of Houston, once received a letter from an 11-year-old girl. She asked, "Is there any love in an artificial heart?" The answer is no. But love can be found in an old heart made new by the power of Jesus. This is Bryant Wright speaking right from my new heart because of a heart transplant by the great physician, Jesus.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click on the link How to Know Jesus. That's rightfromtheheart.org.
We're back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Ken Raynor, PGA golf professional here in Florida and up in the state of Maine. He's got a brand new book from Skyhorse Publishing. I call him Mr. President. It's stories of golf, fishing, and life with his friend George H.W. Bush. And Ken, when we went into that break, you were talking about your relationship and Mr. Bush's relationship with a gentleman who was on this program several times, and that, of course, is Arnold Palmer, who also spent a great deal of time in Florida. And I want you to go ahead and finish up on those stories.
What a great, amazing individual, Mr. Palmer was, and the honor that I was able to have to play with it and share it with my father-in-law, who was actually a great golfer in Arnie's, career, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And Arnie came to Cape Arundel and said it reminded him a lot of Latrobe. And actually, it was really kind of fun. We have an old Massey Ferguson tractor, and our superintendent parked it behind the maintenance shed when Arnie went by with a Pennzoil quart of oil on the hood of the thing for Arnie to laugh about. And it was a fun story. I'm not hitting the ball really well, and I'm making pars, but I haven't struck it very solid. And finally, Arnie comes up to me on the fifth hole as we're walking off after our tee shots, and he puts his arm around me and said, Ken, you're swinging just fine. You're just swinging a little quick. And that's just as President Bush walks by us. And I looked at Arnie and said, I said, Arnie, I'm a little nervous. I'm playing here with Arnold Palmer. And Arnie got the big kick out and looking at the President of the United States walking by us as I said that. And obviously I had never played with Arnie before, but I'd played with President Bush or the President 100 times before. So and the round of golf was just lots of laughs and fun because of the nature of the two exquisite gentlemen that I was lucky enough to play with.
I wanted to ask you, too, about a gentleman who had a home here in St. Augustine for a long time. Every other year or so, he would come to Florida and do a tour around the state. And a couple of years, I was privileged to be the MC and spend time with him in the green room before shows and whatnot. A gentleman from Africa who was known all over the world, one of the great whistling artists ever, and that is Roger Whittaker. And I think you have a unique story about the Bushes and Roger Whittaker.
Well, it's fun. Roger Whittaker, great singer, guitar, and when he was president, they had a Roger Whittaker fan club with his nurses that traveled with him, and that he might stop in if he had a cough prior to seeing, not needing a doctor or a cut or a Band-Aid. And they created a Roger Whittaker fan club, but none of them had ever met Roger Whittaker. And they loved his music, and they played it when they traveled. And, of course, they spent lots of time together traveling the globe. And when Mr. Bush became former president, he thought he hadn't seen his nurses, which he looked at as daughters, which is very common for him to be that engaged with people. He thought he'd invite the nurses and their husbands and their children up to Walker's Point to enjoy a weekend in Maine. To surprise them, he invited Roger Whittaker to come to the house. Nobody had ever met him, but, of course, President Bush was the president of the Roger Whittaker fan club. And the next thing you know, Roger Whittaker was there. We played golf with him for the weekend. And then we had just an amazing evening with dinner and sitting around the living room with all his nurses. Roger Whittaker singing songs. We're in our bare feet. And the nurses are giving the president all kinds of old stories of their travels and, really hysterical tales that the president and the nurses shared through his presidency. So Roger was, I think he had a great weekend, as we all did. So really fun to see Roger in Kennebunkport.
I'm beginning to draw a feeling here of a humanness, a personality, kind of a relaxed era. Who are some of the other celebrities that you were privileged to get around with Mr. Bush that stick out in your mind?
Well, it's pretty amazing when the president would invite people, how all these celebrities that we know are on high demand or have a busy schedule themselves, and how often they made time to make sure they got to Walker's Point. Some of it was for golf, some was for the boat ride, some was for lunch, some was for the weekend. Jim Nance is a great friend, and always tries to come up a couple times a year for a couple days to do all of the above. And along with Arnold Palmer, Greg Norman, Phil Mickelson, David Toms, Davis Love, Freddie Couples, Jose Muriel Thabel, Ben Crenshaw. All these guys came, Dottie Pepper. All these people would come and just play some golf, but just really there to enjoy the president's company more than anything else. We had, Rod Laver, Yvonne Lendl, Kevin Costner from that book Shields, Terry Hatcher. All these, the music world. We had, Michael W. Smith, the Gatlin brothers, Roger Whittaker, of course. And, it's just all these, people that just engaged, what a wonderful person the president is, how welcome they always felt at Walker's Point, what a wonderful town Kenny Bunkport is, and that continues today, even at 93 years old. We just had the president at our house prior to coming to Florida for dinner, which we've done many, many times, and he's still got that sparkle in his eye and his love for people.
So the title of your book is I Call Him Mr. President. Talk about why you decided to make that your title.
Well, the title was probably the hardest part of the book. The tales were the easy part. And, one thing we talked about naming it was keeping pace with the president, because he's just a bundle of energy, go all day long, whether it would be working hard at the office or around, some tennis, around a golf, going out fishing, a speedboat ride, lunch somewhere. So we decided we call him Mr. President because we all do. And not only I, but everybody else around him. We respect the presidency of the United States for anybody who holds the office. The presidency kind of allows people to take notice of something about a president, piques their interest. So we really were trying to do all of the above in the title. But then we wanted to bring it down to the human story about the human goodness that all the staff, all the Secret Service, and all the superstars and all the people that got to shake President Bush's hand have a smile on their face because of it. So that's really what the book is all about.
Yeah. And Ken, I guess you sort of answered my final question there, and we do hope that folks will pick this book up and give it a good read. That's the overall feeling, I take it, that you hope people will bring away about George H.W. Bush once they read this book.
Well, he certainly lived life to the fullest, and he's probably one of the greatest Americans if you look at his resume and all the things that he's done outside of the office also in his 93 years. But the neatest thing for all of us is he shared so much of that himself with all of us. And I have so many dear friends now that are lifelong friends of mine, and other people feel the same way because of the introductions that we've gotten through President Bush. All these wonderful people that I've met, we stay in touch with today, and because the relationship has been so meaningful to us. So hopefully we pass that on to other people, make the world a little better, and we all become, as President Bush would say, a point of light.
Indeed you do. Ken Raynor, the book is I Call Him Mr. President from Skyhorse Publishing, available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com, and we recommend that you pick this up. It's a very personalized story about our 41st president. 5 stars from here, and Ken, we'd like to invite you to come back and do this again sometime soon.
That'd be great. And if people are in the Boca Grande area, stop in Coral Creek. I'd love to sign the book for them and say hello, and maybe they can tell me one of their stories.
That'd be wonderful. This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And if you'll stay put, Michael and I will be back with a brief closing thought following these messages.
Are we there yet?
There's nothing better than a fun family road trip.
Come on, are we there yet?
Don't let a bad tire get between you and your destination. Before hitting the road this holiday season, make sure your tires are properly inflated, damage-free, and have adequate tread depth, including the spare tire. Inspect your tires regularly and keep your family happily rolling down the highway on safe tires. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles.
There's no better time to visit Bok Tower Gardens in Lake Wales than Christmas time. Come home for the holidays with the 24th Annual Holiday Home Tour at Pinewood Estate, a 1930s Mediterranean-style mansion transformed into a glittering holiday showcase. Plus poinsettia and seasonal foliage displays, the all-new Children's Garden, holiday shopping, garden tours, Christmas music on the Singing Tower Carillon, and more. Christmas at Bok Tower Gardens, open daily through January 6th. Proudly sponsored by Visit Central Florida and the State of Florida Division of Cultural Affairs.
How do you define love? Most everyone knows it's real, but who can really describe it? I sure can't define love, but the Bible can. It says love is patient and kind, not envious or selfish or arrogant. Love doesn't keep records when people let us down. Love is being happy for the success of others. It's optimistic and believes in others. It puts up with a lot and never gives up. To sum it all up, love is so much more than a feeling. It's the commitment to love a person no matter what. It's a decision, an action verb. Dr. DeBakey, the famous heart surgeon out of Houston, once received a letter from an 11-year-old girl. She asked, "Is there any love in an artificial heart?" The answer is no. But love can be found in an old heart made new by the power of Jesus. This is Bryant Wright speaking right from my new heart because of a heart transplant by the great physician, Jesus.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click on the link How to Know Jesus. That's rightfromtheheart.org.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you.
2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Employ Florida offers resources and services to help you find employment.
Hi, Gary here. Employ Florida helped me improve my interview skills, plus write a great resume. I attended networking events with many employers and other industry professionals just like me. With the workshops and training found at employflorida.com, I was able to land a great job in my field.
Job resources, real results, hired. Employflorida.com. That's employflorida.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And we hope that you enjoyed this encore presentation of the Florida Roundtable, a conversation with Ken Raynor. His book, I Call Him Mr. President. Ken Raynor, a close personal friend of President George H.W. Bush and, of course, Barbara Bush. And some delightful stories there from the golf course and his personal meetings showing, I think, the depth of personality and friendship that Mr. and Mrs. Bush were capable of offering people.
Yeah, I hear from so many different people that he was just a really good, genuine person.
Yeah, and in politics today, that can sometimes be hard to find.
I agree with that.
Without a doubt. Well, Michael, you have some other venues. Where can folks hear you otherwise here?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R and find the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on the iHeart Radio app.
All right. Well, we want to say thank you for your time this day. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
We'll see you again next week with another edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to the Florida Roundtable, a news and public affairs presentation of the Florida News Network. The views and opinions expressed during this show are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's management, ownership, or sponsors. Please email your comments to reagansmith@fnnonline.net.